Hello, I am Endlessness and welcome back to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, and in this video I'd like to make a short summary of the livestream. Well, both Japanese stream and now global, because we have some news on the upcoming content until year 2 anniversary, and I watched both Japanese and English livestream, and I wanted to cover that much sooner, but I got sick after Easter and spent the whole week in bed, and now only I'm feeling better. So it's long already, but better late than never, because I think there were some important things worth bringing up and discussing. And I will focus mainly on Japanese livestream, because it was a lot more informative and they shared more details, while English livestream felt more like a very quick TLDR, where the guy got only a few short notes without much explanation. And surprisingly, they also already announced the next livestream to happen in September for the anniversary, but they said that perhaps they might do another livestream before that. That's progress, because after 19 months since launch, that was our third official livestream. But also, Tetsuya Nomura is always present on those, but this time it was even more interesting because he was reading comments during the whole livestream. And at the end, he essentially scolded Ever Crisis producer because many comments were harsh, meaning that players are unhappy, but he also said that players care and they should take player feedback more seriously in the future. But also, after 11 months, Nomura addressed the camera problem and how powerful it is, essentially a must-have weapon for strategy, quoting them, and how much more difficult the game is if you don't have it. So they are working on a solution and will get back to us when they have more details. I don't have camera myself, and I know many of you struggle too, but it's nice to hear that Japanese players are in the same situation, and while they are late, because it's been almost a whole year since camera, they are at least discussing the issue and will try to come up with a solution. But after this livestream, I also don't think Monster Hunter crossover will ever return, and they might just give us a similar weapon instead. That also tells me that when we see crossovers with IPs owned by Square Enix, reruns are essentially guaranteed, but if it's a crossover with an external IP like Monster Hunter that's owned by Capcom, either pull or miss out, most likely forever. I might be wrong, but at least that's what I'm guessing now. However, we have a roadmap, and in my opinion that's amazing because it's our third or fourth roadmap, but at least we know what to expect in the upcoming months. But character updates first, and they want characters to be more in line with their respective class roles and bring out their unique characteristics. And that's precisely why we are getting Wind Arcanum for Barret, who is a tank, or Yuffie just got a very good supportive set that a tank could have benefited from. Or Aerith is getting Wind Arcanum soon. In all seriousness, since we have this class system, which in my opinion is a bit awkward and could have been done differently or better, I'd like to see banners that make characters fit their class more. They have also addressed the main character issue. They mentioned that Tifa stands out above other characters and is the best DPS, but Cloud and Sephiroth are currently underwhelming, while Zack has been neglected and doesn't have many weapons. And they said that all characters are equally important and are planning to do adjustments to improve those three main characters. And that's precisely why Tifa just got another big PP banner. In all seriousness, it's good news for anyone who likes Sephiroth, Cloud or Zack. Both Sephiroth and Cloud are my 2 DPS, and it's been frustrating for a while to see how underwhelming they are compared to Tifa or Vincent, while Yuffie is speedrunning to join them in that holy trinity of god tier attackers, while Sephiroth is underwhelming and Cloud is just garbage. Personally, I am looking forward to see how they are going to make them better and less garbage. However, I'm also a bit skeptical that they will actually improve them and make it more balanced, but I would also like to be positively surprised. To be honest, I'm just not sure what or how they are going to do it to actually make them better, and I'm speaking mainly about Cloud and Seph, because Zack is another case. He just doesn't have many banners, and his 3 best weapons might be old, but they still hold up and aren't outdated at all. The opposite to Cloud and Sephiroth, especially now since he has Exploit Weakness. But Zack's issue is that those weapons were in limited crossover banners and you just can't get them anymore, and without them Zack doesn't have anything really. Unlike Seph and Cloud, who had many banners, but most of their weapons are outdated and they are at the bottom of attacker class. Another interesting thing is weapon overboosting, and specifically overboosting after you OB10 and max out the weapon C ability, so OB10 plus that gives you few extra attack stats. They mentioned they are working on improving that because getting a copy when you already have OB10 feels like a waste, and they even mentioned weapon parts exchange, which has been completely useless since launch. And it sounds good, but it could also be bad. Good because old weapons like Murasame could get an upgrade and could be usable and viable. That sounds great. I am not expecting launch weapons to be suddenly on the same level as weapons we are getting today, but at least they would be more usable, because it's crazy how far behind those weapons are. 750%, 800% compared to 1100% is a massive difference. However, I am really hoping they don't go into this much more predatory direction by making new banner weapons OB10 not be the final upgrade anymore, so OB10 plus 10 or OB10 plus 20 would upgrade it even further. That would already widen this already very wide gap between whales and krakens and the rest of the player base. We can already see how the whales are bullying crash bosses and making speedruns for fun, while those battles are inaccessible and impossible for the rest of the 99% of the player base. It would also make the game a lot more predatory than it already is, if anyone would need to pull not for OB10 but for OB30. Going for OB10 is already very expensive. In my opinion, those old launch weapons deserve something to make them better, an upgrade, but that's it. Also, as we already know, April Fool's skull thing is real and it's already here, we already have it in the game. And initially I didn't mention it at all, but when I saw that they made a whole website for it with graphics, pictures and story, I expected it to be real and that at some point we'll get it in the game as event. It was just too much effort for one day joke. But yeah, those banners however are limited, so it seems 3 featured banners is all we are going to get before we are bombarded with even more limited banners. But an amazing thing about it is we can OB10 each banner in 2 pages or less. Or better said, OB10 in 2 pages is guaranteed. It sounds amazing, and it would be amazing if this was a permanent improvement for all future limited banners, and I dare to say it would even solve most of our issues. But they mentioned it's only for this event, so there is that. Really wish it was a permanent change on every limited banner, because yes, while we have I think too many banners in year 2, this would be a very big improvement, and it would make those limited banners a lot more accessible for everyone, especially because ideally you want those limited weapons to be at least OB6, and you won't be able to make much progress with them after those banners end. And with this system, OB6 will be at least guaranteed if you pull 1 page. But we already have Thief Hands, we'll get Barret with Wind Arcanum that debuffs wind resistance, and Aerith will get Water Arcanum that buffs water damage. In June we are getting Final Fantasy VI crossover rerun and a seasonal event with Angio Penance boss. FF6 rerun is a bit surprising because I expected it to be in August just before the anniversary, but it seems they switched that up. So if you pulled on FF6 banners, it means you might save crystals, but what worries me is that last year when they rerun FF9 crossover, we got the same old banners, but with a new weapon inside those banners, and frankly I found it insulting. It wasn't an issue for me personally because I didn't max out those FF9 weapons, but original FF9 crossover was horrible, and many of those big spenders, they spent a lot of money to max out those weapons, and then when the crossover returned, they had to pull again on those weapons they already maxed out just to get a new weapon. And I think it would be much better if they would just do a new banner with the new stuff. But, well, probably it will be the same, but we'll see what it looks like in a month. However, Kefka escalation doesn't sound nice at all, and I'll probably cry again because Kamura would be perfect for it, which I don't have. But also in June we'll get an update to Party with additional settings and filters. Sounds interesting, and it should be a quality of life improvement, but it's just for order formation. Personally, I never use it because it's been terrible, and I just rather make my own party, so I won't benefit from this feature at all. In July we are getting another summer event, and they have teased Zack and Angel outfits, and I really like them a lot, especially Angel with his Buster floaty. But that's not all, because we're also getting double salmon, and it's going to be Bahamut with Leviathan. It already sounds like it's going to be very painful battle because Leviathan is just very annoying. However, there's also going to be an update to the stream phase. And until now, when we get a sigil phase, we only have to break sigils, but in the future, on some bosses, and specifically those mechs like Scorpion, Sentinel or Airbuster, which have a very long sigil phase, they will get an additional sigil. So the more we attack with that specific sigil, the higher damage multiplier we'll get after we stagger the boss during an interrupt phase. And it is an interesting change, because now instead of quickly breaking the sigils, we can extend it to increase the multiplier and then do a lot more damage when the boss is interrupted. And that will also require us to equip more materia. But I also think that's where this new elemental sigils will be important, because with normal rune rush we barely tickle, but with those new mech bosses they always have elemental weakness, so we'll do a lot more damage with those for sure. Not as much as with weapon abilities, but we'll be doing a lot more damage while increasing that interrupt multiplier than to deliver some really big bonks when the boss is staggered. Also, Dragon Quest Tact crossover is happening in August, and Dragon Quest is another Square Enix IP, and while that mobile game is being shut down on global, it's having a crossover with Ever Crisis right now, but we'll get that crossover in August. And I have no idea about Dragon Quest other than it looks like Dragon Ball, so I'm not going to guess what we might get. But we got a teaser of Sephiroth in his new crossover outfit, and for me, it's just another costume I don't like, but I'm curious to see what gear and weapon does. But we also should get 3 banners for other 3 characters, or maybe even 4. But at least this is all they have teased so far. However, having a brand new crossover right before 2nd year anniversary doesn't sound good at all. Also, with Crisis Core ending and FF7 not having much left, I think during anniversary they will announce a new story. And I'm hoping it's before Crisis, because it's the one most of us didn't even get a chance to experience it. And it would also make most sense, because Before Crisis is a spin-off, and it takes place during Crisis Core and FF7, while Advent Children and Dirge of Cerberus are sequels. So yeah, that would be all we did learn from the livestream, or at least what I consider being the most important. And all those improvements and features, they sound nice, and I'm curious to see this new stream phase, but as I said, I'm rather skeptical what they are going to do to make Cloud and Sephiroth less trash, because Cloud getting a Bahamut banner definitely did not make him less garbage, and he just needs a lot to get out from the dumpster. So I'm just very skeptical what they are actually going to do, but I would love to be proven wrong. To me, it's just funny how the guy was contradicting himself so many times, saying one thing and then few seconds later completely opposite. Just saying that all characters are important as well as making everyone balanced, but few seconds later acknowledging that Tifa is OP. And there were so many more situations like this one. Like, really? Really? However, What gives me hope is what Nomura was saying regarding player feedback, and that they need to make the game more accessible, because when they showed graphs with less than 0.5% of people clearing B30 Shiva ammo, the producer laughed that it's more than they expected, while Nomura said it's way too low. And then the whole camera issue and more. It might be just PR talk, but it felt a lot more genuine, that Nomura actually wants this game to succeed and cares. And he was genuinely surprised and disappointed to see so many negative comments pointing to the state of the game not being as great as it could be. It might be copium, but it actually gives me some hope that things might improve, because in the end we all want this game to succeed so we can have fun while playing it. But yeah, we'll see. At least for now we have some info and a roadmap on what we might expect until the 2nd year anniversary. But I would also love to hear your opinion and what you think about all of this. But yeah, in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next one.